Hey everyone, it is Friday and it's time to do some designing. We actually had a request for a tall vase, so this week we're panned back a little bit so that we can do a longer stemmed arrangement, and all the buckets that went out this week have longer stems in them so that we can do it in a taller vase. So the fun thing about this vase, it is a footed vase with a 5.5 inch open. Is you can use the chide hydrangea the way that we do for a cylinder vase, just to form a bit of a grid at the top of the vase and then put all of the flowers into, so that way we don't have to use a tape grid and we don't have to use too many greens. We can really be purposeful with our placement of the greens, which is important when we're designing vases like this too, so it doesn't get too bushy. So in each of the buckets, we have 2 of these antique hydrangea, the classic, here we go, the classic green variety. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these 2 and we're just gonna put them together the same way we would do a low vase or like a centerpiece. Just kind of make a circle with it, like so. And then we're gonna use a piece of raffia wire, bind wire, you can use tape, whatever you have on hand. And we're going to tie the 2 stems together at the base of the blooms. So twist that off like that, just like you would do a twist tie, and trim off that excess. And then we're gonna measure it to our vase, and we want to cut our stems so that they land sort of in this bottom area of the vase, so we don't have to worry about the water level dropping too far and then our stems being out of water. And we're gonna take any of these little knobs off the sides of our hydrangea, like so. Go, just to make the stems as clean as possible so you have less stuff getting in the way of the rest of your stems as you add them in. I'm gonna go ahead and pop that in. And I'm just gonna pull the edges of the hydrangea slightly over the edges of my vase, so it just sort of covers it. It doesn't have to be huge. The whole point is that it's just going to provide a natural grid for our flowers to go into. So you're just gonna cover the top of the vase there, and there are some more greens in the bucket as well. So. But this is where we're going to start. The greens, in fact, that are in the bucket are, this out of here, Israeli ruscus, which we work with a lot. This time I left the stems nice and long so that we can use them for a little bit more height coming out of our vase. And for these, we're gonna measure them to our vase the same way we did with our hydrangea, but we just don't want any of these leaves on the bottom to go underneath the hydrangea. We want the stem to stay pretty clean when it goes into the water. So we're gonna strip off any of those bottom stems, and we are going to cut this and add it to our vase in between the laterals in the hydrangea. So for instance, this one you can almost get 2 placements out of if you trim right above that first set of leaves, and then you clean this one. Now we've got 1 placement that can come up and out of our vase, and then we have 1 placement that can fill right above the hydrangea. So go ahead and tuck that in. And what we're doing is, as we're adding each of these stems in, we're gonna kind of crisscross the stems underneath the base of the hydrangea. So if you are working with a more traditional vase, something like an urn shape, that has a cinch, and that's gonna pull all of the stems into a crisscross for you, and that sort of builds a grid in the neck of the vase. Since this vase doesn't have a cinch in it, we're essentially creating that shape by crisscrossing our stems around where that raffia wire tie is. That will hopefully then allow the other stems to go into our arrangement without falling to the side. So tuck a piece in there, and just kind of going around like spokes on a wheel. Fill in the shape. Now you can do this all around, or you can do it with a little bit of asymmetry. For now, I'm just gonna kind of tuck them in, and then we can replace them as we go. And the next thing that we have are some really lovely, I think they're princess crown roses. So they have a nice dense petal count, you can see there. And they open up really nicely. So we just wanna take those outside petals off to allow it to open a little bit more, give it a blow in the center there to get the petals to start expanding, and we can give it a bit of a roll also to get that bloom moving along here. You can see here, it's opened quite a bit. So this, I'm gonna leave my stem a little bit longer again. I'm gonna come in to my arrangement at an angle. So I'm crisscrossing underneath. You'll have 3 of these in there. So here's another one. Put it below, and leave any of these leaves on that look pretty. If they're not so pretty, you can take them off. We wanna make sure that our stems are nice and clean though. So go ahead and trim off any thorns or little knobs from where leaves came off to the side, right? Because we want our stem to be as clean as possible. And if you're using scissors or clippers, it's actually really helpful because it keeps the outer membrane of the stem more intact than if you were to strip it with a knife or a rose scraper. Because then the outside of the stem will get sort of beat up, and then it'll shed into your water and make the water less clean, which will eventually degrade your flowers. There we go. Get that a little open so you can see it's open like so. I'm gonna put it over here on this side as well. And with my last one, same dealy, I'm gonna trim off any of these thorns or leaves that are on the stem. Give it a little blow, give it a little roll. Get that balloon moving. If you want it even more open, you can take these petals and flip them back a little bit, do a bit of reflexing just to get it a little bit more impactful looking. That's always a nice trick, especially with a rose with a high petal count. Sometimes if you do this with a tighter rose or a rose that has fewer petals, it looks kind of like a, I don't know, like a bullet or like a Hershey kiss coming out of a tutu. It's not super pretty. I'm gonna take off any of these damaged petals on the inside here. Get that out of there, whoops. I found a spot where, there we go. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and reflex a couple of these petals out so that it makes it really fluffy and pretty. There we go. So you see it has a nice look to it there. All right, so I'm gonna put this one coming out this way. So again, they're all being seen all the way around our arrangement. We also have 3 of these really cool, they're called Mandarin Expression. These have really short petals, even though they're really dense, and the center is visible, which is very cool. So these don't really open a lot. They come pretty open and they stay that way. And you can see the petals are very curly and dense in the center there. Sometimes when they first come in, they're a little tighter than this, so you trim them into warm water and they'll open up quite a bit. But because those petals are pretty short, they really don't open up much more. They kind of get sort of plate shaped. So I'm gonna go in between with these. I have 3 of these guys. Chuck those in there. 1, 2. There we go. Take off any ugly petals. I'm leaving my stems pretty long here. With the anticipation that it'll leave room for the rest of the stems, but then also if I need to bring it in a little bit, I can trim it later. It's always easier to aim for the longer stems. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room to move your stems around and design with it without having to remove them from your vase and start over. Also, it's going to give you more options to trim it shorter. Obviously, once you cut it short, you can't put the stem back on. So we want to make sure that we have enough stem there so that we can work with our arrangement as we go forward. We have some cool astilbe in the bucket, sort of this kind of blushy taupe color. So I'm gonna add that in between. And I'm gonna use it sort of to fill in between my blooms instead of like sticking out. So it'll kind of be in with the greenery, essentially. This is another vase too, where it's, if you want a lot of greenery, you could incorporate some stems from your yard, some foliage from around. We're using pretty limited greens, the idea being to just kind of layer the blooms in our arrangement, but you can certainly add more greens if you have them available to you and you want to. But this way is nice because it just kind of keeps it clean. You can be a little bit more purposeful with where you place them, and you don't have to worry about it getting too like bushy. We also have these really lovely scabiosa here, and they have these nice pieces on the side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna trim it in the center here. So I have one scabiosa piece, and then I also have this piece at the bottom that has the buds on it, because I feel like this is a really nice texture. So I wanna use this in the arrangement too. So I'm gonna go ahead and tuck that in. I'm gonna pull this little nub that I cut off. I'm just gonna take take that off entirely so I don't have this unfinished edge visible. Instead, it'll just be like a stem with two little buds coming off like so. And I'm gonna tuck that down into the center of my arrangement. There we go. I'm gonna hold on to my bloom for a sec. Same thing with this guy. I just have this little guy on the side here, so I'm gonna trim here. So I have like a nice long stem. And then I also have this cool little bud piece. I am gonna take this leaf off here though, and I am gonna trim this nub off from where I trimmed the scabiosa, so that I basically have like one longer piece. I'm gonna use that in my arrangement as well. And I got one more in here, similar to the last one. Nice long stem with these greens at the bottom, so you could choose to use it as one unit by taking this off, or you could, again, separate this out and use it, and then also keep this and use it. So that's what I'm going to do. So this is giving me a little bit more foliage in my arrangement, a little bit more texture in my arrangement. Here we go. There we go. Very nice. I'm holding on to these. I'm gonna use them later because I don't want them to get beat up in the arrangement. So you have some larger blooms too. We have these really pretty peonies here. These are kind of like the ones, we usually call them Pepto-Bismol, but they're a little bit paler than that actually. They're super pretty. So I'm gonna get that into my arrangement soon so that it doesn't get in the way of other blooms. I'm gonna tuck that in there. I'm gonna actually move this to still be out of the way so that I have a nice spot to really see my peony here. So I'm not following my own rules. There we go. There we go. I might want to replace this to still be actually, but we can do that at the end. We're gonna get all of our blooms in there first and see what's going on. There we go, another peony. This one has some pretty foliage on there, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the foliage as is. And what I didn't do last time, which I should have done, is you want to cut the little nubbies off the sides. That way, if you do find that you need to replace or move your stem around, it'll be much easier, and it won't pull any of your other stems out with it. So I'm gonna put this guy here. Oops, maybe I'll have it here. I'm gonna put this behind it. I don't want my green covering my peony. I want my peony to stand out. So there we go. Oops, let me tuck that in a little bit more. There we go. Okay, then we have these really lovely snapdragons. These are Canadian snapdragons. They have a little bit of a shorter bloom on top of the prettiest color, and they match really nicely with the peonies. So I'm gonna cut that on an angle and just wanna strip any of these greens off, being careful again not to damage that stem too much, but just get it nice and clean. You want any of the greens to be above your hydrangea. You don't want them to go down into the base. So we're gonna measure and we're gonna add this in. Oops. So that it's sticking out. This is gonna give us a little bit more height coming out of our arrangement. Let's get that in there, in there. All right, and there's 5 of these in there. So I like the greens on there. I think they're very pretty. I just don't want them to get in the water and make my water messy. Because any of these little bits that get down into the water basically just are going to allow bacteria to grow faster, and then you're going to find that your water gets scuzzy faster and your flowers die faster. So you really want to make sure you keep those stems nice and clean going into your vase. Now you're definitely going to have to change your water, especially when you're working with a clear vase like this. Normally we use opaque vases, which gives you a little bit of a grace period where you don't have to worry about seeing the scuzzy water. But when you're using a clear vase, there's no way to hide. So you got to make sure you're cleaning that water at least every other day, certainly whenever you see it getting cloudy. Not just because it's ugly, but because it is going to make the life of your flowers much shorter if it gets dirty. Put this in here. Here we go. You just want to kind of see them all through your arrangement. So I went off to here, one off here. I can pull this to still be up, and that's going to be another point here, point here. So I feel like I might need to jog this guy out a little bit. So I have something over here, and then I put my last one maybe more centrally placed, coming up and out of my vase arrangement, like so. So this grid that we've built with flowers underneath here, that's what's basically holding these blooms in place right now. Again, that's why it's so important to go underneath and form this grid of, or kind of like a bird's nest almost, of stems, because that's going to allow you to put these pieces in and then let them just float. They're going to stay where they are. And again, coming out from the center of your arrangement, like spokes on a wheel, coming out radially is gonna make sure that you're getting that crisscross underneath, and it's gonna help keep all of your flowers in place. All right, so I got this guy here, this guy here, some greens coming up. See lots of pretty shapes going on. All right, the other cool thing that we have in our bucket this week is, oh, let me move this here, because I don't want it to get hidden. There we go. Sweet pea, love these. Fragrant, they're pretty, very delicate, but they're on a long stem, so we definitely wanted to get them in here. So again, you're gonna trim that on an angle, and we're gonna be careful with them because they have a pretty delicate, thin stem. I don't want to like break the stem going in there. There should be 4 of them in here, and I want to be able to see them. So the ones that are straighter, I'm going to have coming up and out. The ones that are more curved, I'm going to have coming out from the bottom of the arrangement. So this one, for instance, has a little bit more of an arc to it, so I'm going to have it coming out of the vase here to give a little bit more of a horizontal width. And the ones, and the ones that are a little bit taller, I'm gonna have those coming up out of my arrangement, so you see it coming up vertically. You see that lavender all through your arrangement, and it matches really nicely with the Scabiosa too. And we're gonna add those in there shortly, and that'll give you more pops of that really pretty blue purple as well. All right, so I'm gonna put this here, kind of straighten out our stems. They're going where we want them to. Coming out this way, and I have this one coming out this way. Just let it be kind of natural. There we go. Pull those greens out so we can see them. They'll still be out so I can see it. Okay, all right. Then we have some lovely ball dahlias, and they're greens, so I'm using their greens in their foliage in the arrangement as well. I like to tuck these in earlier just because they're not as important to me as the actual bloom, but I want them in there for texture, and I want their stems in there to help form that nest underneath, to have more back and forth to hold the nicer stems on top. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tuck these little guys in first, these little buds that came on the side of my dahlias. So I can give some cool shapes, and also, there we go, some cool textures. Then we have our dahlias in here. So what we're gonna do with these is we're just gonna cut those on an angle, take off any greens that are gonna be that would fall into the water, and then I'm just gonna go right down into the middle with them so we can see them in our arrangement. There we go. It's gonna fill that space in the center, but also give us that color moving forward, which will be nice. I've got another one here, so I'm gonna trim this guy. And I want this to be visible over here, since I have the other one over there. All right, so it's getting a little bit fuller. So I'm looking and I see this really pretty color here, but there's something over here. So this is where I'm gonna come with my Scabiosa to balance out my sweet pea blooms. And these have very thin stems, although they're pretty strong, but you don't want to push them in too hard because you don't want them to break. And also you want to make sure that they kind of float. I mean, that's really the pretty part of the Scabiosa, is that, you know, you put them in to your arrangement, and then their blooms just kind of float there. Let the stems do the design for you, and just let them figure out where that bloom is going to go. And see, what I'm hating here right now, I wouldn't say hate, but you know, I've got this point that's coming exactly to here, and I don't like that. So I am going to put this back where I want this to be here for sure. So I'm gonna move this back instead. Here we go. So that it is filling in the center, and I get to keep my lavender out to the side to balance these other lavender pieces. And then we have this going on here. I'm looking, move this guy's around, this guy around, here, here, so it comes out. So make sure all of my stems are actually in water, very important, as we're going through. All right, here we go. Oh yes, sorry. So I would suggest too, if you're gonna reflex one of your roses, or the petals on one of your roses, you should probably do all of them just for consistency in your arrangement. I know I didn't show that until I got to the third rose, but coming back through, it'll be nice to get a little more size out of these Princess Crown roses. So I'm gonna just sort of fluff them as I go. Pull those down so it gets a little more shape there to match the other ones. There we go, make them a little fluffier. Pull everybody out a little bit. Again, if you left your stems nice and long, you have room to move them in and out. If you cut them too short, they fall down, you don't have any space. So definitely make sure on the front end that you are making your stems long enough, okay? And then, oh, and this one kind of going the wrong way, so I'm gonna move this so it's straight. There we go. All right, so there you have it. It's a nice airy arrangement. Every bloom is placed so that it has its own space. Nothing is laying on each other. We did that by making that grid underneath of our hydrangea and using the natural blooms from the hydrangea to create a grid, or to create the grid for us originally. Oh, yeah, so there we go. Move this down a little bit so it wasn't touching this one. Everyone has space, everyone has room to open, there's air, there's movement, there's layering of the flowers, and then we are good to go. Okay. So if you got one of the buckets this week and you try an arrangement like this, definitely post it, show us pictures, we love to see it. If you have any suggestions, the reason that we did the taller vase this week rather than doing a short one is because somebody requested it. We have been getting a lot of requests for dahlias as they're starting to come into season, and some other different types of flowers. So the sweet pea that we got in this week just happened to be so pretty with the scabiosa. We do not get sweet pea as often, and we usually don't get it on stems this long too. So we wanted to include that for sure this week. The dahlias also, awesome garden roses. June is rose month, so we've gotten a ton of roses in as well. And since we still have peonies hanging around, we wanted to get a couple of those guys in there while they're still available as well, because they're just such pretty meaty flowers, and honestly they are relatively long lasting. A lot of them too, it's like as long as you place them and you leave them alone, they'll hold their blooms really nicely. Some of them even will kind of color change a bit as they age, which is a nice feature of them as well. Yeah. So yeah, so let us know in the comments what you like, what you don't like. Certainly give us suggestions, different designs you might want to see, different containers you might want to see, different flowers you might want to see. And then, of course, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and follow along with us on Instagram, on Facebook, for other pictures and design inspiration as well. And if you want to get in on this Friday flower fun, link through to our website and go to our subscriptions, and you can get the bucket, the DIY bucket that I do here each Friday, except for last Friday because I'm on vacation, and also a fully designed option, also a bunch option, yes, which makes a really great gift idea, actually. If you have someone who loves flowers, I would love to get some interesting, cool, curated blooms every week, but has a ton of vases. That is a great option for them as well, because you can just chop it and drop it and place it in the vase. So anyway, until next week, happy designing, share your designs, enjoy your flowers. Don't stop getting flowers, because they just are so tremendous to brighten mood and really like make your space so alive and vibrant. And come back next Friday for another DIY, and I will see you then.